Hey, folks, welcome to the final episode of Draft Talk for the 2023 season before the first round of the 2023 NFL Draft tonight. I'm Alan Saunders. That's Nick Farabaugh. We've been talking to you leading all the way up to today. Today's the big day. The first round starts tonight. The Steelers are picking at number 17 overall, and they will be drafting of the 2023. Actually, we don't have any idea who they're going to be drafting. We still don't really have any idea. I mean, I wrote today, SteelersNow.com. The consensus pick for the Steelers, according to the NFL Mock Draft Database, is Maryland cornerback Deonte Banks. I love him. Great player, great pick. But the consensus is he's a 13% pick. He's the favorite. Basically, we're still all over the board for who the Steelers are going to pick. Does that surprise you, Nick, that we got this far and we still don't really have a clear idea of who the Steelers are targeting?
No, and it shouldn't surprise anybody. Like, why would it surprise you when you look at their board and they don't have any obvious needs? Like, this is something
surprising compared to the last 2 years, right?
Yeah, I mean, we knew it was going to be a quarterback. At least we knew it was a quarterback, right? You didn't know necessarily. Maybe you thought it was Malik Willis. Maybe you thought it was Desmond Ridder. Maybe you thought it was Kenny Pickett. Whoever you thought it was going to be, you knew it was going to be a quarterback. The year before, obviously, it was going to be Najee Harris. Like, that was a very obvious pick. But this feels much more like 2020, right? And that was with the second pick. You had a second round pick at 49 where it could have been anybody. But this feels like that where they're in a BPA type of deal. And it's pretty clear to me that they filled most of their glaring holes to the point where they have this board and they can be like, all right, whoever's BPA here, whether that's a corner, whether that's a tackle, whether that is, hey, a wide receiver, a defensive lineman, a linebacker. I mean, whatever you might want, safety. I mean, there are a multitude of positions they could attack at 17. I think there's only 3 positions I can knock out at 17, which would be quarterback, running back, and tight end. So, I mean, that is really kind of where we're at in this sphere. And so it shouldn't surprise anyone that there's that much disparity, especially because there are multiple options at each spot that also make it tougher to narrow it down.
Yeah, I think there's a lot going into this uncertainty, right? I mean, one is that the Steelers are in this position that they haven't been in a while where they can kind of take any position. And while I think there's a little bit more urgency towards tackle than maybe anywhere else, I definitely can see them going in any number of different directions, depending on how the board breaks, even positions that are not like premium needs for them, like edge rusher, maybe. I can still see them being the best player available and the Steelers deciding to go down that road if that's how the board falls to them. So I think part of it is the Steelers have this very open approach to this draft class where they can take a lot of different players. The other thing is I think we're still very unsettled at the top. Nobody even knows who the second pick is going to be, let alone the 17th. And so I feel like this draft is very difficult. As I was going through my mock draft the other day, it's a very difficult draft to sit here and predict what's going to happen in what order. I think there's a lot of moving parts. I'm expecting there to be a lot of trades, more than usual. We've already seen 8 first-round picks change hands. It wouldn't surprise me if another half a dozen get added to that. I think we could see a lot more trades just because it just feels like there's this draft where there's not a big top to the class. People are going to trying to be cramming into the top part of the first round. A lot of teams need quarterbacks, and there are 4 or 5 of them that could be taken tonight. So there's all this uncertainty happening around the Steelers that I think is adding to the uncertainty that we're seeing when it comes to their pick and not really knowing who they're going to pick at 17.
Yeah, and listen, like the trade-up scenario we talked about with the Steelers is all there, right? I mean, that's a possibility too. I increasingly said this, that I feel like there's a top 6 or 7 and then it just falls off. I mean, there's really not that many true first round prospects. There's not 17 of them. I'll tell you that. There's not 17 of them. There is about 10 of them. There's usually about 15, but this top of this class is not good as say last year's or the year before that. But what this does have, it has a lot of those fringe guys, a lot of them. And I think more than most classes, like you'll be able to get, say, borderline first, second round talents, say all the way down near 50 in this class. There's that many guys at these multiple spots with a ton of depth at different positions. That's kind of the beauty of this draft class to me is I think it has a ton of depth at, say, edge rusher, tight end. I think, it has good depth at corner. Obviously, that is the best group in this class to me. It is cornerback. It just has so many guys. And so there's enough options at every pick you have to be like, we can get a starter here. We can get an impact guy here. And that's the beauty of this class. So when you are talking about trading up, to me, when you talk about trading up, you either want a one clear upgrade to a guy that you are looking to upgrade upon, or two, you have such a glaring need that it is one of those positions. Think about interior D line or offensive tackle, where maybe there is one guy that stands above the rest that you want to go up and get them. But that's kind of where you are for trading up. Or obviously, the other question is the quarterbacks, and I think that's kind of going to be interesting because there are about 5 quarterbacks that could go in the first round between Young, Stroud, Levis, Richardson, and Hendon Hooker. And that's going to be very important when we talk about the Steelers at 17. How the quarterbacks fall is going to, I think, dictate how the offensive tackles and the corners fall, and that's going to very much dictate who's on the board at 17.
Yeah, I think I have 14 players in my first tier where, I guess you'd call that a first round grade or whatever. There's a couple more in that second tier that I like, that I wouldn't hate as a first round pick, but I don't necessarily think are up there. But I think it's important for the Steelers to get one of them. Look, I mean, they don't draft this highly very often. It is not that expensive to get from 17 to 13 or 14 to make sure you get one of those top players. If you think about a normal year where the Steelers are drafting down in the mid 20s, it's very expensive to come up and get a player like that from 25 to 15 compared to where they're at right now. Maybe it would be a third round pick, maybe it would be a fourth round pick to move up and get one of those top guys. And I think if you're talking about moving up, to me, the guys that you're moving up for are Jalen Carter. I don't expect him to fall the top 5, but should he, I think that becomes an option. And then one of those top tackles for me, because those are the players that you're not going to be able to get anywhere else. I love this cornerback class. Like you said, I think they can get good corners deep into day 2. I wouldn't see the need to trade up for them, even though I do like Christian Gonzalez the most out of that group. But to me, if it's going to be a trade up, it's going to be a tackle or it's going to be a defensive tackle. Right now, I'm feeling like that's the best case scenario for the Steelers is move up a couple picks, make sure they get one of those top tackles and not sit there and hope and then have to scramble if it goes differently. Also, as we continue the discussion, we're going to be taking some questions. So we've got some of you in the chat already on YouTube. Go ahead, fire away. We'll get to them a little bit later on. So I want to make sure we add that. But Nick, what's your thought? I mean, I talked to Chris Carter on Locked On earlier this week. To me, I think move up to, say, 14 where the Patriots are, 12 where the Texans are. I heard the Packers might be interested in trading down somewhere in that range to make sure they get one of those top tackles. To me, feels like the best case scenario for the Steelers. What do you think about that?
I have been saying this the past few days. I don't really like the tackle class. I don't. I don't think there's a single tackle in this class I would trade up for. That's my opinion. I think that they have too many warts. I would rather sit at 17 and go elsewhere with that pick. I don't think there's a huge drop-off to Anton Harrison and DeJuan Jones and even Matthew Bergeron. I personally don't think that's a huge drop-off. Now, if you're talking about playing over Dan Moore, sure, there is. But I'm not willing to trade such huge draft capital to move up. And I think it actually might cost more than it would, say, if you're trading up to 11, maybe with the Titans. I know that's been talked about a little bit, maybe them trying to move up or move out. I think that might cost more than you think in this class, just because we talked about the lack of premium talent at the top. I think
11 would be expensive. There's no question.
Yeah, I
think you're trading 49 at that point. I think they can move up to where the Pats or the Jets are without losing a second round pick.
I mean, they probably could, but I also keep looking at the tackles, and I think that they're more likely to fall than people think. I don't think that these are premium top tackles that we have seen in previous classes. I think you're going to have, like in my mock draft today, I have them picking Broderick Jones. I think Jones being there at 17 is far likelier than people are giving it credit for. I think that the Patriots are kind of telegraphing their pick. I think they're going to take Zay Flowers if he's there. I think the Jets are probably going to go away from tackle. That seems to be the buzz the more and more we get there. And I think the Commanders are going to go corner. So really, there's not that many tackle teams. I think, maybe with the Cardinals moving out of 3, that sounds like that's probably going to happen. I think, sure, Paris Johnson probably goes there if he's there. But it would not surprise me if we don't see a tackle go in the top 10 if the Cardinals back out of the top 10. We could see Johnson maybe go as early as 7, but I don't think that it's going to be crazy. The Bears maybe could jump into that tackle market. But I think, one of Jones, Johnson, or Wright will be there at 17. I would not trade up too far. Now, if you're talking about jumping in front of the Jets, maybe trading with the Patriots, I think that's a little bit different because I think you won't give up a ton to go get them. But none of these guys either, to me, are slam dunk starters. even Paris Johnson, I have concerns with beating out Dan Moore. I just think Moore is so entrenched as a starter in terms of his experience that rookies that have warts like these guys, they're going to have learning curves. It's going to be tough for them to fully kind of jump on board. So I like Broderick Jones just at 17. I think that's their best case scenario. They stick at 17. They get Broderick Jones. I think he's the perfect left tackle for them. I think he fits them beautifully. But I think the trade up scenario to me, it's just very dicey because I don't love any of these tackles enough to go up, say, 6 spots, 7, 8 spots to go get them. If we're talking 3, I think that's a different story.
I think I disagree. I like Paris Johnson enough that I'd go up to 9 to get him. I think he's worth it. I think he has the potential to be the best offensive lineman in the NFL. He's an elite athlete. He's played minimally at the position and has a lot of growth to go. So I'd go get him. I also think I'd go get Broderick Jones a couple picks, maybe not, just to get ahead of the Jets, basically, to make sure you get him, because I like him a lot more than I like Darnell Wright, who I'm not enthused by. I think he's a guy that can be a solid starter at right tackle, but does not feel like he has a ton of upside beyond that to me. I think Jones is basically the same player to me, but probably can play the left and has some untapped potential in terms of some pass blocking techniques that he has yet to master. But I just like the athlete. I would trade up for either of those players. I'd go up far to get Johnson. I would only go up a little bit to get Jones. And I think if they stay at 17, they will probably get one of those tackles. I think it's most likely to be Wright, who, like I said, I'm just not a big fan of in terms of what I think he brings to the table. Like again, like you're talking about it being out, Chooks. I don't think Darnell Wright is better than, or talking about better. I don't think Darnell Wright is better than Chooks right now. Like I think Chooks would play over Darnell Wright. Now maybe you could flip Chooks to the left. I don't know. That's something I've been talking about for years, but the Steelers don't seem to be on board with that idea. So I don't know. To me, I think it's not. I agree that it's not a great tackle class, and that we're talking about the idea of one of the top guys being there at 17 at all is pretty rare. Here's another tackle question. We may as well hit it while we're here. Why isn't DeJuan Jones viewed as a top tackle? He didn't give up a sack, and he dominated guys. I like DeJuan Jones. I think he's worth a swing on the upside. I don't think he handled the pre-draft process very well. He only worked out one day at the Senior Bowl and then kind of shut things down. Didn't seem like teams were very happy with that decision then. Only ran the 40 at the combine, didn't weigh in at his pro day, didn't work out at his pro day. He weighed in heavy at the combine. I think there's some questions about his weight and his dedication. But he is a big dude with some freaky quick twitch for how big he is. And if you're a team that wants to take a swing on some upside, I really like the player. I'm not sure the Steelers are so enthused based on the fact that he didn't take his scheduled pre-draft visit to Pittsburgh. But I like him. There's reasons he's not one of these top guys we're talking about.
And he's just kind of raw than a lot of them. He's a big dude. He has great aggressiveness. Some flashes on tape are awesome. He's just very up and down, very inconsistent at times with his technique. That's a guy that needs to trust his technique more, trust how big he is, trust his length. That's just a guy you have to get to buy in a little bit more. He's just got a few more warts to me than other guys with some of his pre-draft questions, his weight. Like a Broderick Jones is a very similar type of player with the same type of demeanor. He's a little smaller, but the guy that did everything he wanted to in the pre-draft process, who has just really soared his stock, in my opinion, in pretty much every way he could have, right? So DeJuan Jones, really, really nice player. I would like him at 32. I think he's a good pick there if you can get him. In fact, I'll be real. I don't think that the gap between Jones and Johnson is that crazy. I think it's enough to where I would be like, okay. I think that it would not surprise me if DeJuan Jones is being the better of the two Ohio State tackles. But there is a lot more question and projecting with DeJuan Jones to me than there is, say, with Darnell Wright, with Paris Johnson, with Broderick Jones. Yeah, I mean, there's just not as much projection. Yeah. And so he's kind of your big swing if you take him. But in this class, there are 4 guys that you'd probably rather have. And then also, he's a guy that has those questions. I think if he was a guy that had crushed the pre-draft process, I think we would be talking about him as a first-round pick. I'm just not sure that he has answered those questions. He didn't even weigh in at Ohio State's pro day. I mean, that did raise alarm bells pretty clearly throughout the league. So I just keep saying this tackle class to me just keeps bringing up questions, just questions and questions and questions. And I think for the Steelers, sitting at 17 is their best option because one, they have enough needs to where I wouldn't want to give away much draft capital. And two, this tackle class doesn't make me fall in love with any singular player enough to make that move up. You know, when we talk about Paris Johnson, for example, that's another guy who just needs to trust his technique. He's got the athletic tools. The ceiling's very high. I'm just not sure he's really as plug and play as people think he is. I think he's a little rawer than you think. I think he's not too much more polished than Broderick Jones is, and everyone talks about Broderick Jones like he's the raw one. I think both of those guys can start year one, but you're going to have to get them to buy in.
I think Broderick Jones might be more polished than Paris Johnson right now.
Yeah.
I'd be drafting Paris Johnson right now because of the upside, not because of what he can do next Tuesday. I don't really. Well, my approach to the draft is I don't care what they do. I care about the athlete, right? I mean, and then obviously we can't from the outside really too well anyway evaluate the person. That matters too, right? You got to have somebody that's going to be able to work hard. But I mean, the athletic traits for me are what makes Paris Johnson special, not necessarily what he's done or what he would do right now. And I got in my mock, I had the Steelers trading down to 40 in the second round and still getting DeJuan Jones. Like, I think he's not even a guy I think is really going to be in the conversation league wide, like right at the end of the first round. I think he's fallen more to the middle of the second round. Steelers might even get him at 49 if he stays on the board. But to me, I think the way the draft looks, like the tackles are all clustered at the top. Like, okay, all the guys we talked about, and maybe you can add Matthew Bergeron in that group. Those guys are probably all top 50 picks. There isn't another tackle I'm even like mildly interested in after that, right? Whereas like if we're looking at say like corner, wide receiver, edge rusher, linebacker, like even defensive line, there's guys all the way down the board I think are interesting players that might be good rotational pieces. Or man, tackle, it's like early or not at all.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I kind of think tackle is a very similar. It's a better class than the receiver class is, but like I don't think you're getting guys pushed up because it's a bad class. Like no one's taken, no one's taken Jordan Addison in the top 10 because it's a bad receiver class. Like that's kind of the thing. You know, Jackson Smith-Njigba and Zay Flowers and Addison, Quentin Johnston will probably go in round one. All four of those tackles we named, including Antoine Harrison, I think Harrison might sneak into the back end of round 1-2. We'll probably get 4 first-round tackles. But I don't think you're going to see guys pushed up just because of the scarcity. I know it's a very important position. I just don't think that there's enough to fall in love with these guys. The projection of Paris Johnson, if Paris Johnson maxes out, I'm still not sure kind of if he is the best he can be. Is he the best left tackle in the league? I don't think so. I think that his ceiling's a little lower than you are selling it on. I think he's kind of polished enough to where I know what he can be at his peak, which is a really good starting left tackle. But Broderick Jones can be the same thing. Like that's not a big gap between Broderick Jones and him.
No,
and Darnell Wright,
big gap, maybe 5 or 6 picks I would put between those guys.
Listen, I like Darnell Wright a heck of a lot more than you do. I think he wouldn't necessarily be my favorite pick at 17, but he's a real plug and play starter that is going to be a good starter for a decade in this. Like that is what Darnell Wright would be to me. He's very polished with his hands, his footwork. He's got all these pass sets in his arsenal. He's a really plush run blocker. I think if I'm talking best pure fit in terms of philosophy that Pat Meyer runs, Darnell Wright fits the best. The issue is he's a right tackle. And I don't know if I want to shuffle up Chuks Okorafor when he just had the best year of his career at right tackle. But I don't think they're going to be completely against that. But again, there are warts with all these guys. With Broderick Jones, I have to teach him his footwork, how to get more sets in his pass sets, hand usage. But I know he's a plus run blocker. With Paris Johnson, hand usage, trust his technique, mix up his pass sets more. Like there's a lot of that of big microcosm questions, not small questions, bigger questions that I have with these guys to the point where like I'm not going to love them enough to trade up for them. Any one of them falls to 17, I'll pick them. I'll run that to the board, actually, for the most part. I'm just not sure I'm in love enough to trade up. Broderick Jones, Paris Johnson, I would probably move up 3 or 4 spots for, but I wouldn't trade up anymore.
Fair enough. So I got a question here about trading up for Christian Gonzalez. Again, I kind of touched on this. Like to me, it's not that Christian Gonzalez is not worth the pick to trade up to get him. It's that how much better is Christian Gonzalez than corners 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 in this class? Like a little bit. I just don't think you're getting, if you stay at 17, you're getting a really good corner. So I don't really see the need to go trade up to get one that might be a little bit better. And I'll be honest, like, especially considering the Steelers' history in evaluating corners, like, make that pick with less risk, not with more. Don't make that pick with 2 draft picks. Make it with 1. Like, I'd rather have 2 corners. I'd rather have the corner that falls to 17 and then take another one at 120 than I want at 80 than trade up to go get Christian Gonzalez.
I mean, Christian Gonzalez is a great player, and I think probably the best pure fit in the class of corners for the Steelers. But, I mean, it would cost a lot. We're talking about, it seems like Devin Witherspoon to the Lions at 6 is kind of what's going to happen. To me, once the corners run start, it's going to start. And, it's a really good class. That's going to be BPA for a lot of teams. So Gonzalez, I mean, to get Christian Gonzalez, we're talking about moving up a significant amount of picks, more than it would take to get Paris Johnson.
You're paying 32 at that point.
Yeah, I mean, you're trading 32. So, where would you have to move in front of Las Vegas to probably get him? I mean, that seems to be a nice pick too. To be sure that he could go to Vegas. He has a lot of suitors. So he's going to be a guy that goes top 10. You'd have to trade to the top 10. I just don't think that a top corner like that is so much better, as you said, than, say, Joey Porter Jr., Deontay Banks, Emmanuel Forbes, Julius Brandt, Tyreek Stevenson, to where, you can get that guy. And I don't think the Steelers' corner need is so dire where they need to get that guy.
Like, I think people are way too far down on the Steelers' corners. Patrick Peterson had a better year last year than any Steelers corner has had in like a decade and a half. Like, he's really good. I understand that he's old and he's probably not going to be that good forever, but like, he's better than his year last year was better than any year of Joe Hayden's career. Who's the best Steelers corner before that? I don't know. Ike Taylor? Like that. Okay. Like he's really freaking good. And then Ahkello Witherspoon was good when he was healthy in 2021. Levi Wallace is serviceable, if not great. Like, they need a slot guy, but it's not a dire situation at corner to me, like some people are making it out to be. I'm actually far more concerned about the linebacker position than I am the corner position, even though it's not this high draft capital slot and clearly won't be addressed in the first round because there aren't any. But, I don't know. I think their corners are pretty good.
The corner, I wouldn't say they're good. I think they're fine. I'm not like panicking over that. I would like to add 2 guys to that room, though. I know that for sure. I think a double down strategy at corner is a good one here. I just don't think, I keep saying this, I'm just not sure a trade up is that great of allocation of resources for the Steelers here. It's not, they're not swimming in draft picks right now, and I think they need to fill out some depth spots. So I mean, Christian Gonzalez is a great player, but he's not so much better. In fact, I think Devin Witherspoon is better than him. I have him as corner 1 right now. I know that's kind of flip flop, whatever, but there's like 5 legitimate round 1 corners in this class. If you stand at 17 and get Deontay Banks, is he that much worse than Christian Gonzalez?
It might end up being better. I mean, there's a higher variance on Deontay Banks, but like, he's athletically, he's every bit as good. So like, no, I got maybe 8 corners I feel very good about being starters coming out, 9 maybe coming out of this class. Like, there's nowhere deeper than corner. Don't trade up for 1, maybe take 2, like you said, especially if you get like a big and a small, you go Joey Porter Jr. in the first round, then give me Travius Hodges Tomlinson or Riley Moss later on and get a slot guy to go with your big outside guy. Yeah, I absolutely love that. Let's talk about a couple other spots in the first round, because I think people in general are a little bit underrating the idea that the Steelers do not take a corner or a tackle in the first round. We talked about the problems with the tackles. We talked about how deep corner is and the fact that you can get any of them anywhere. I think there's a real chance that this pick is somebody else, a guy like Lucas Van Ness, Brian Brzee, Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think it could be a guy that has not been really attached to the Steelers a ton in this process that ends up being the pick.
Yeah, I mean, it could be. I think logically the BPAs would be tackle or corner. And I talk about, how I was down in the tackle class, but by the time you get to 17, Fred Eric Jones and Darnell Wright are up there as BPAs. But I think this is interesting because you talk about Lucas Van Ness. I think he's a fascinating player. That is a guy that has some very, very Steelers-y traits about him.
I've been high on this guy forever. I really like the player. I don't know that, he's a guy that's kind of a luxury pick to me because he probably would not even play all that much this year if they drafted him. But I mean, I think you're looking at like a future defensive line stalwart type guy. Mike Tomlin talked a lot at his Monday press conference about how defensive positioning is becoming more and more specialized and you don't have these like do-it-all guys anymore. And I think, if you take that for what it's worth, the idea of there being like a one Cam Hayward to do everything for the Steelers on the defensive line, it's probably not going to be the case anymore. It's probably going to need to be like a bigger guy and a smaller guy trying to fill that role. And I think Lucas Van Ness certainly could be about 2/3 of Cam Hayward. And it just looks like a mini JJ Watt to me. Like, I love the player.
Yeah, I mean, he fits a lot of what they could want. Brzee is I'm not huge on Brian Brzee.
I'm not either, and the injury history is questionable, but there is definitely some upside there.
I mean, there's some upside, but I think you largely see what you get with him.
It's a good play. I don't think we should cross him off the list either. Like,
we probably shouldn't, but the fit is just very questionable. I'll throw you a wild card name. If you want a Terrell Edmonds, Artie Burns name to come out of left field that you might not be talking about. How about Mozzie Smith out of Michigan? That's the name that could be like the whoa pick if you talk about that. I don't think it's going to happen, but like Mozzie Smith at 17 makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense in terms of the wow pick because he fits what the Steelers really want to do. He's a very versatile guy. He's a very, very polished player. I mean, that would be a guy that could step in and be a versatile player right away on the line. I have
a hard time seeing the D-line getting picked over enough that he would be the best one there at that spot. But maybe. Also really like the idea of him in a trade down. Last guy I want to talk about 17, Nolan Smith, fascinating player. Is he an edge? Is he an off-ball linebacker? Is he Micah Parsons? I don't know, but I'd like to find out.
Listen, we can't – there's also one player we do have to talk about that we just haven't mentioned. We can't forget Jordan Addison. I mean, you never know. It could be a giant smokescreen to throw everyone off the scent. And the entire time, the Steelers wanted Jordan Addison to pair with this college quarterback and Kenny Pickett. I've been saying this since January. It's like it would not be shocking to me if throughout the whole process, the Steelers basically show zero interest in him. And then on draft night, they're just like, we'll take him because it's a very realistic possibility that he's a BPA pick. So I don't think you can forget him. I still think they'll go corner or tackle, but I think the names we just discussed have to be considered.
Yeah, like Addison and Brian Branch, and Maisie Smith, and some of these other guys in trade back scenarios too. That's one of the questions we have. So I want to grab it here. And says, I want to stay at 17, trade 32 for more picks, and say, okay, so it's a question about trading 32, not 17. But I think trading down is interesting to me. I don't know. I think there's some people that have in their head like, oh, the Steelers have so many needs, they need more picks. And I'm like, okay, they kind of do, but they kind of don't. Like, they need a corner and a tackle and maybe a second defensive back of some, nature, whether it's a slot corner, some kind of safety, whatever. They need a defensive lineman. They probably need another tight end or wide receiver, some kind of pass catcher. But to me, there are not like 7 or 8 big needs where like, oh my God, they have to go back and get more picks. Like, if they can get more and they can sort of maximize the number they have in that happy spot in this draft that I think is maybe the first 2/3 of day 2, great. But to me, I'm not like, Mike Tomlin basically was like hanging the for sale sign on pick 32, and that's fine. But I just don't see the need to like, oh, this team absolutely has to trade back either. I think the Steelers are a pretty average team. To me, I want to add a couple of great players and not add like 5 more average ones to the average team they already have.
It completely depends on what the board is. If the board is ransacked of intriguing players,
sure. Always, yeah.
Like if the best player is like an interior O lineman, I know they could take a Steve Avila or a John Michael Schmitz, but like I'd be more open to the idea of trading down if that was the BPA, just because I know I have answers there. But if there's an Emmanuel Forbes, for example, there, who's a guy that I mock to the Steelers, I would not pass on Emmanuel Forbes. Darnell Washington is a guy. Any of those tight ends get there. Michael Mayer. I mean, if Michael Mayer is there at 32, you think the Steelers wouldn't be interested?
100%.
If one of the wide receivers falls there,
There's a couple edges, Will
yeah,
McDonald being the primary one to me that are options there. And Adike Azoma from Kansas State, probably in that range. Keon White, maybe in that range.
yeah. I mean, listen, there's always one dude that falls that everyone's like, whoa. And they could potentially be a pick. I mean, we don't know who's going to be there. Joey Porter Jr. has been sliding down boards a little bit recently. What if he slides all the way to 32? I mean,
Wide
there's no
receiver
way.
is an option there. You talked about Addison falling. Maybe he gets all the way there. Jalen Hyatt could be in that range as well.
Quentin Johnston has been Zay Flowers.
And then to me, this is the first place you could see a linebacker go as well. Trenton Simpson or a Drew Sanders. Maybe a little bit early for those guys, but not out of the question either.
Oh.
To me, I'd rather stay at 32 and get the best player I can, unless the board is picked over or someone is going to really overpay to get me that pick. Somebody really wants a Hendon Hooker or a Jordan Addison or someone like that falls out of the first round that's willing to pay a premium for that pick. Okay, then I'm interested. But I mean, I don't see the Steelers draft. Mike Tomlin said they don't have any glaring needs. I agree with it. And so when you don't have glaring needs, you need good players to upgrade on what you have. That to me says you should be concentrating your draft resources, not spreading them out in general. Obviously, the specifics of who's available and what people are willing to pay go into that decision just as much as the general sort of mindset does. But in general, I'm not like trying to trip over myself to trade down in this draft as the Steelers.
No, I don't think I would 100% be. I'm not attuned to that at all. I mean, I would be open to the pick, of course, but if someone comes up like the Packers, for example, with their now 3 day 2 picks, I believe, or I think the Raiders have like 4 of them too. If someone offers me a haul of those, I'd be willing to move back just because the amount of picks that you could get there are so great compared to maybe the guy you would get at 32, but you have to understand that those top players that are there at the end of day 1 go very quickly. I mean, we're talking about trading down 6, 7, 8 spots, and a lot of those guys are gone by that point. And maybe the Steelers are okay with that. Maybe they don't think that they need one of those guys. Maybe they're more, maybe they do get a Deontay Banks or Joey Porter Jr. at 17, and the best players are Emmanuel Forbes and all of those guys. And they're like, well, corners are the best on the board. We really don't need a corner anymore. We just drafted one. So going to move down. I mean, that's possible too. I think that kind of changes how everything goes. I think D-line at that pick is very likely as well. We didn't even mention, that's where Mozzie Smith, Keanu Benton, I think comes into play at 32. I just think you have a lot of options there. And you have so many guys that you can just pick. So you're working from a position of strength if you're the Steelers. So if no guy, it's going to take a haul for me to get to move off. That's how I would agree.
Last thing I want to talk about here is the first round ahead of the Steelers, right? Draft starts at 8 p.m. tonight. Steelers at number 17 are about halfway through that process. What are you looking for in the first half of this draft that are going to be signals for you about how things are going to go for the Steelers?
I think it's the Cardinals at 3. I think that's the big thing. And I then think, it depends on what they do. If they stick at 3, we've heard the noise that they could draft Paris Johnson that early. If that ends up happening, I think then you have to ring the alarm bells on those tackles, because then they're going to get pushed up the board a little bit more. And that's when you, to me, have to start worrying about, are any of them going to be there? And so I think that's something to watch. I think the Cardinals are the big team to watch early on. What if the Texans do with the 2nd overall pick? It's becoming more apparent that's Will Anderson, but I don't think that affects them all that much because Tyree Wilson's going to still be there. I think Chicago at 9 is going to change a lot of what happens here. They have a lot of direction. Could go tackle, could go receiver, could go just so many different areas. I think also another key thing to watch. What happens with the quarterbacks? I think that's going to be huge for the Steelers. 4 quarterbacks that potentially go before 17. So who comes up? Who drops back? Because what if a team does drop back that could be right in the position to take a tackle, or Joey Porter Jr. at that point? I think that's kind of different. It's not about the teams going up as much as teams that will come down as a result of potential trade-ups. I also think that Jalen Carter is going to be very interesting, because to me, if he doesn't go at 5 to the Seahawks, then you become, in a very interesting way, he's the BPA. I don't think that to me takes the Bears off the tackle market, because I think his floor is at 9 or 10, right?
I think the Lions could take him at 6. So that's like one place he can go if he doesn't go to the Seahawks. But yeah, then it starts like an interesting slide. Or does someone like the Falcons, who I think they're talking about, Bijan Robinson is the guy I see the Falcons, like they could move down 5 spots and probably still get him. So does somebody want to come up to get Jalen Carter, and how does that change the complexion of the first round?
Yeah, I just think there's a lot of things to kind of look at when we are talking about this first round. I think that, for example, what about, does Witherspoon at 6 happen? Run on corners maybe happens a little earlier. I think there are a lot of questions about that. But I'm more in tune of kind of seeing what the Cardinals do, where Jalen Carter goes, and how those quarterbacks fall and who comes up and gets them. Because to me, that's going to dictate more of how this draft goes. I think, one of the scenarios that has been talked about recently has been the Titans coming up from 11 to get a quarterback, with the Cardinals drawing back from 3 to 11. I think that's a really good scenario for the Steelers, because I don't think anyone's going to be super enthused. Again, I think the league's going to be a little lower on the tackle class than maybe the media is right now. I think that you could see him drop all the way to 11 and Paris Johnson could go there. I think if that happens, I think the Steelers should feel really good about one of those tackles being there. I largely believe that the Patriots are not going to draft a tackle. I still think that Zay Flowers is that pick, or they'll trade out. I think that they've kind of telegraphed that, and it seems more and more like the buzz is Jackson Smith-Njigba goes to the Packers. And then I think that also you look at the Jets right now, it seems like that's moving away from tackle. I think the door's wide open there. So I think you got to watch those things. And so I think there is a lot to watch. I also think you have to watch teams that might come up in front of the Steelers to get a tackle. I think that's something to look at. There are teams in the immediate range after them that could potentially come up and snag someone. So that's something to look at. But I think
Tampa at 19 is one for sure that is a tackle needy team that could come up a little bit. Absolutely. There are a couple more, maybe Jacksonville down at 24, and Buffalo down at 27 needs a right tackle as well.
Yeah, absolutely. They all need tackles. And so it just kind of depends on where this falls on this plane. But I think the biggest indicator of how this draft's going to go for the Steelers in terms of tackle, because I think you should be saying right now the favorites for the Steelers at 17 are 4 players. I largely believe this. There are 4 players that I would largely consider as the 1A group. Darnell Wright, Broderick Jones, Joey Porter Jr., and Deontay Banks. Those are your 4 to me that I would put on the big radar. So let talk to me about how that corner class falls, and then talk to me then about how this tackle group falls. And I think the Cardinals at 3 are going to be the big indicator of how this tackle draft is going to fall.
Yeah, I think so. And we'll see how it plays out tonight. We'll be on the South Side talking to Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan and whoever else who the Steelers pick is. So stick with us. Hopefully we're gonna get together again and do this. I don't know if it'll be late tonight or tomorrow morning, or maybe we'll figure it out. We'll do this again. Continue to do this as the draft continues. Stay with SteelersNow.com for all the Steelers draft coverage. That's Nick Farabaugh. I'm Alan Saunders. Thanks for joining us. It's been fun. NFL draft coming up next.